Our genes make us who we are. They decide everything from hair color to which parent we resemble the most. But they can also pass medical conditions from generation to generation. And today we're going to focus on one such inherited condition. It is called Duchenne muscular dystrophy. It's a condition that basically causes the muscles to weaken over time, starting in early childhood and sadly ending in death in a person's 20s or 30s. It almost always affects boys, with around 100 new cases of it diagnosed every year. But while there's currently no way of curing it, it is the subject of medical research, and life expectancy has been increasing. Furthermore, being able to recognize the condition's early symptoms could maximize your child's quality of life. Joining us in the studio is Emily Crossley. Her son Eli has Duchenne, and also with us, as always, Dr. Sarah Jarvis, Radio 2's GP. But if your child has Duchenne or you'd just like to know more, do call 08000 288 291, email vine@bbc.co.uk. So Emily, first of all, good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for coming in. And you're a former journalist. You initially thought your son was perfectly healthy.
Yes, well, thank you for inviting me, Jeremy. My son was 3.5 when he was diagnosed, and it came completely out of the blue. And the way I sort of describe it really is like a cluster bomb going off in my life. You know, there was the initial devastating impact of diagnosis, and then the daily heartbreaks every day, because what Duchenne does is to steal a child's ability to live. You know, it attacks their muscles. And, you know, while my son was playing outside in the corridor, the doctors told us he would be in a wheelchair by the age of 12, he would be completely paralyzed by his late teens, and that life expectancy was early 20s. But what they told me that upset me the most was the fact that his mind would be unaffected. You know, my beautiful boy would be trapped knowingly inside a body that was dying on him. And, you know, we were just so distraught. And I think, you know, now 7 years into this journey, what we're finding so hard, and what other parents really find so hard, is watching their child gain all the milestones, you know, that our friends' children are gaining, learning to crawl, to walk, to run, to jump. And now we're beginning to watch him lose all those abilities. And it's the daily devastation of the disease, you know, that is so hard. And I think, you know, when you have your children, your overriding urge and necessity, you know, the power of being a parent is to protect that child and nurture them and grow and help them grow. And that nurturing, impulse is sort of crushed by this disease, and we're sort of rendered powerless in the face of it, which I suppose is why, you know, my husband and I set up a charity, Duchenne UK, to fund research, to bring hope and, you know, to change this diagnosis for this generation and future generations.
So what's really strange about this illness is that when your baby is born, you do not know. Is that right? And then your child, usually a boy, develops normally, and then something makes you think, wait, this isn't as I expected. Is that right?
That's right. Most boys tend to be symptomatic from about the age of 2, sometimes often earlier, but when they start to miss certain milestones, like they don't crawl or they walk later, and yes, they look normal and appear healthy when they're born, but actually they are much weaker than a normal healthy baby, because, you know, the dystrophic process starts, from birth. So they do, you know, for those first few years, you feel like you are, quote unquote, a normal family, and you have all the dreams, desires and aspirations of a normal family with healthy children. And then all of a sudden you're given this diagnosis, and your son is still the same son, but your expectations, your plans, your dreams are completely thrown off course, and you have to recalibrate for a new life. And in a sense, you have to grieve for that life you thought you were going to live, and recalibrate for a new one. And I suppose I don't know what's worse in a way, whether you're told immediately your son has Duchenne, or whether you're living this sort of false bubble for a couple of years. But I mean, I think one of the challenges is we were relatively lucky in the sense that the diagnosis was quite swift, and it was a straightforward diagnosis. Many families, and I speak to many families, you know, they take their sons to their GPs, or they take their sons to a specialist, and it's quite a difficult disease to diagnose, because although the symptoms are quite obvious if you know them, if you don't, it's difficult to diagnose.
So what kind of symptoms did you see initially?
Inability to get up off the floor. He was very late walking. He had pronounced calf muscles, which we just thought meant that he was a strong little boy. But that's actually one of the most common symptoms of Duchenne. And he had this thing called Gower's maneuver, which is when he gets up from the floor, he used his hands to push himself up on his thighs. He couldn't just jump off the floor like a normal child. He has to. It's a very laborious process, and
it looks as if you're climbing up your legs. Is the way it's described. It's really odd, isn't it? That I've had a couple of patients over the years, and it does seem so strange. You've got this child with these really strong, healthy-looking calf muscles. The problem is that the calf muscles aren't working properly, and so they overgrow to try and compensate for that. So it doesn't mean just because your child looks as if it's a muscle wasting condition, but actually, ironically, you can start off with normal or even large-looking muscles.
And so have you had families in your surgery, Sarah, where that they're worried about their child and you suspect?
I've had a couple of children where they've walked late and we've referred them for diagnosis, and on 2 out of 3 occasions they've turned out not to, because there are lots and lots of reasons for children walking late. So I wouldn't want every parent whose child walks late. Children with Duchenne muscular dystrophy often do walk. I don't know if Eli had this, with a sort of waddling gait.
Yes.
But of course, again, as a parent, you just think there's so much variation between children, it can be really difficult to pick it up. And because we're talking 2 families a year across the whole country diagnosed with this, 2,500 families overall who've got a child affected by this. Of course, the average GP or health visitor may well never have seen a case, so they may well not recognise it in the early stages. And there are so many variations on the theme of normal walking that it can be really difficult to pick up.
So 2 families a week, and you, Emily, when this came up, you were told you would have, Eli would have a creatine kinase test. What is that?
It's
CK test.
Yeah, CK test. Well, CK levels in a normal healthy child would be around 400 to 400. In a child with Duchenne, they're around 18,000 or higher, and that's an indicator of Duchenne. But they then need to check the genetic. They need to screen his genes to see whether it is actually a Duchenne mutation.
And do you know about the genetic background to this, Sarah? How it
I do. It's
happens?
called an X-linked recessive disorder. So basically, we all inherit one of each sex chromosomes from our parents, an X from our mother, and either an X or a Y from our father. If we have 2 X's, then it's a girl. If we have 1 X and one Y, then the Y, what determines what sex your baby is, actually comes from the father. Now, if a child has got 2 X chromosomes, then one of them can produce enough of this chemical called dystrophin. It can, if you like, it can accommodate for the unhealthy gene. About half of cases, though, there is no family history. It just arises as a random mutation. So in half of cases, there is no family
right,
history.
so it's not like cystic fibrosis where you know that both parents are carriers, for example.
So a mother can be a carrier, but only if the child then has a boy and the father provides a Y chromosome. If they then have a girl and the father provides a healthy chromosome, then they will have a carrier child who is a girl. If the mother provides an X chromosome which is faulty and they have a boy, then that child will only have the faulty X chromosome, so that will be a boy who's affected.
But I think it's important just to say that mothers can be carriers without their mothers being carriers.
Absolutely,
so that mutation can create spontaneously in the mother, and then she doesn't know she has it until she gives birth.
Right.
And I think one of the other challenges with sort of late diagnosis, or when children are diagnosed roughly around the age of 3.5, is that often by that time a mother will have had a second child. So my dear friend Alex, for instance, she was pregnant with her second boy when her eldest son was diagnosed, and she had an agonising wait for her second child to be tested. Equally, I have another friend in Ireland who has 3 boys with Duchenne, because by the time her eldest was diagnosed, she'd already had her twins. Yeah. So it's difficult to do newborn screening. They were doing it in Wales, but they stopped it. But I think once we are in a position where we have treatments approved, we have one now, but we will have more soon, hopefully. Newborn screening, I think, will be vital to stop, to help families plan.
It's already so important that parents are aware so that they can make the decision about whether to have genetic tests themselves, and particularly if they're thinking of having any further children.
And Emily, Eli is 10 and a half.
Yes.
How is he doing?
It's a challenging age. In the beginning, it was about my husband and I dealing with our own grief and despair and trying to manage that. And now it's a whole new world of pain because we're forced to see this disease through his eyes. And, he struggles with feeling different, not being able to do the things he loves. He's slowing down for sure, and he knows that. And he has some very loving, caring friends, but it's heartbreaking for us to see him suffering. And he knows a little bit now about what the disease will do. He knows he's going to be in a wheelchair, and that's very painful for him. He's a massive Chelsea fan, and nothing he'd like more to do on a Saturday afternoon than just kick a football around, and it's very cruel, and he's incredibly brave and delightful boy, but it's very hard for him, and
you're so brave too.
Well, it's amazing to hear. Stay with us. Emily Crossley, who's, by the way, co-founder and head of a charity called Duchenne UK, talking about her son Eli. Dr. Sarah Jarvis is here as well. You might want to call on this 08000 288 291. ZA, The Weekend, Jeremy Vine here with Sarah Jarvis and Emily Crossley talking about Duchenne muscular dystrophy and just really understanding maybe what the illness does and what it is if you're not affected by it in your family. Rebecca Singleton in Sandbach, Cheshire says, my son has Duchenne. He's only 3.5, so he's relatively able-bodied still. He falls over a lot, though, and he can't quite keep up with his peers. We go for 3 monthly checkups. Duchenne doesn't need to be the be-all and end-all. Life still goes on even with it. But you, at some point, I guess, Emily, have a conversation about life expectancy, and that's the hardest bit.
We haven't had that conversation yet with our son. And to be honest, Jeremy, I don't know what the answer is to it because the standards of care have improved. There are a number of treatments boys can now use, steroids being one of them. They do come with very severe side effects. And there are a couple of heart drugs that boys can take. And with daily physiotherapy, stretching, and a good diet, life expectancy is increasing. And my hope is that some of the treatments we're funding, some of the medicines that are now in clinical trial will be able to extend life expectancy for this generation and the ones following.
So the really important thing is that, yes, at the moment there is no cure. Emily was talking there about steroids. Steroids do have major side effects, but of course they do have major benefits, which is why we still use them regularly. And here we're talking there about using steroids to help maintain muscle strength, but that comes with side effects. There is some very exciting new stuff out there at the moment, and I genuinely think, looking at it, some of the ideas in terms of gene therapy, because we've already seen this in cystic fibrosis, that by effectively what we've got already is the drug called Italuren in the UK, which effectively allows the body to skip over or ignore the mutation. But with gene therapy, the idea is that you use a vector, something that can carry a normal gene into the body, which will then allow the body to use the normal gene and not have to take it, or not have to make use of this faulty gene.
And I know that they're always obsessed with how you introduce the new gene into the body. With this, they think you're doing it via a virus.
You are, but of course, don't forget, we're surrounded by viruses.
Sure, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's just fascinating. They always. We interviewed a guy who does gene therapy, and he just says he had the word delivery on his wall because it's not so much about getting the gene, it's about how you put it into the body.
And getting it into the right place and ensuring you do so safely.
Okay. Mary Sevenoaks is in Weymouth, and Mary, your son has this terrible condition.
Yes, he does.
How's he doing?
He's doing really well. He's 11 years old, so has started to lose the ability to walk, so is pretty much in a powered wheelchair all of the time. But I just wanted to demonstrate, really, that it doesn't stop him doing anything. He's currently in the process of going for his black belt in Taekwondo.
Fantastic.
Good.
Which is,
that is quite stretching, I should think.
Yeah, but actually we found a Taekwondo group that are letting him do it in his chair and out of his chair. So, it's just to show that actually if you find the right group, you can find something that will work really well for your son.
And is he happy in his heart?
Absolutely. Don't get me wrong, he has his down days, but actually he loves life. So he's found things that work for him. He's taking up power chair football, which again is great for the boys because one of the things that he struggled with was not being able to play football like his friends. And he challenges himself, he's doing an indoor skydive to raise money for Muscular Dystrophy UK to help with research.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Mary. Thank you. Mark Chapman is on the line in Edinburgh. Now, I was asking about life expectancy. You think you may be the oldest person with Duchenne in the country, Mark?
Yes, I think so. I'm 47 years old.
Okay. How is life for you at the moment?
It's very good, actually.
So you're in your own home?
Yes.
And what sort of adaptations do you have at home, Mark?
I've got an electric wheelchair. I'm on a ventilator. I've got all the equipment.
What would you say to Emily?
I would say Emily. I just want to give hope to parents out there that people with Duchenne can live a good quality, good quality of life with appropriate care and support. But unfortunately, that is something that's lacking for many of us.
Of course. But if you got to 47, Sarah, that's an old sufferer.
It's extraordinary because, of course, all too often people who have Duchenne muscular dystrophy end up having problems with their breathing because the muscles for breathing get weaker, and you can also have heart complications. So, of course, infections and things can cause problems and can carry off somebody with Duchenne. But really, really inspiring to hear from Mark and indeed from Mary that not only, yes, we hear all the time about incurable diseases, and there's this terrible negative feeling, and of course it's absolutely devastating, and I could hear it with Emily. She's so brave and she's talking, but so important to remember advances are being made all the time, and if you aren't around, or if you haven't yet had the opportunity to take advantage of those advances, you can do things. It may require a little bit of thinking outside the box, as in the taekwondo and the powered wheelchair, but of course you can also have a really good quality of life, and great to hear from Mark that he's clearly enjoying life.
Yeah, I mean, Mark is an inspiration, and I think he does a lot of advocacy for adults with Duchenne, and we actually work with DMD Pathfinders to help push the adult agenda. I think it's really important, and I know that Duchenne doesn't stop you living a life. I'm just saying that at that moment of diagnosis, you recalibrate to a different life. Yeah. And I know many families whose boys are really happy and have made it work for them, and we will do the same with our son. It's just that moment of diagnosis, you're going down a different path. Yeah. And the research is at a very exciting stage, and we funded £10 million worth of clinical trials and research, and we're actually running our own clinical trial that will be due to start later this year, looking at repurposing, which is an exciting approach where you take one medicine that's already been approved for safety and efficacy in one disease, and then you test it for your disease. So we've got a pipeline of products that we're looking at for that, and we're also launching a hub later next month where patients can come and find out information that they want to about clinical trials and where those trials are happening in the UK, because that's another challenge, is the lack of capacity at some of these neuromuscular centres. So we've launched the DMD Hub. We're funding almost £1 million worth of doctors, nurses, physiotherapists to run the trials. So we're really trying to do whatever we can to accelerate the research at the same time as campaigning for standards of care.
Of course, repurposing drugs, as you so beautifully put it, is all about taking drugs where we've already done a lot of the hard work. We've checked that they are safe. We've checked that they can be used in humans. And of course, the great thing about that, firstly, is that it speeds up the process of bringing a drug to market. We do it for a lot of drugs these days.
It's partly because it's so slow to get a new drug on stream.
Indeed, but it's also, of course, because it's so very, very, very expensive. When we're talking about, £100 million to get a drug to market, the simple fact of the matter is that if you've got a relatively rare condition, and Duchenne muscular dystrophy, there are about 2,500 people in the UK, so it is rare in that sense. It's defined as a rare disease. That means that the cost of the research and development for those drugs needs then to be divided up among far fewer people. So really exciting.
I'm just going to read a couple more comments. Caroline Jordan emails, my son Alex was diagnosed with Duchenne at age 5 and was given a life expectancy of 20 years. Thanks to superb medical attention. He's going to be celebrating his 23rd birthday shortly. He has managed to remain in mainstream education throughout. He's currently studying computing. He enjoys holidays, and he has a lovely girlfriend.
Fantastic.
Shelley Haggett from Gloucester emails, we lost our dear son in June 2015. He was 21 years old. We gave him the best life we could. He was a beautiful young man. We miss him terribly. We always hoped for a drug to slow the progression or provide a cure for Duchenne, but it didn't come for us. We will always be immensely proud of his achievements and to have had him as our son. Michelle Lyle in Ashford, Middlesex says, my son Dan has DMD, as we can call it. He's 18 now. He struggles with the social isolation that comes with it. We do have a care package, but it's tough when you're 18. Let's just have a look at one more here. And Ben Vickers in Durham, give him the last word. He says, I'm a 23-year-old man with Duchenne. I'm very independent. I'm at university, Durham, I guess. I'm happy. My parents raised me normally. I think it's given me the best chance in life. You are a normal family if you make it that way. So some encouragement. Thank you.
And the
both.
message that keeps coming through here is families are everything.
Thank you. Duchenne Muscular Dystrophy was our health special today on Radio 2.